Welcome to episode number 225 of Destination Linux. Whether you're brand new to open source or a guru of sudo, welcome to the show. This podcast is for you. My name is Ryan, and with me today are Jill and Michael. And on this week's episode of DL, we have a special guest joining us. Matt, the host of DLN's GameSphere podcast, is here to talk to us about PlayStation's recent announcement with Discord and what that might mean for Linux gamers. Then we're going to take a field trip. I'm so excited about this. I gave Jill a special mission for Jill's museum for another rendition of your favorite segment, but this time it has to have a tinge of gaming theme to it. So we'll see what Jill picked. I have no idea, but very excited. We're also going to be covering a cloud-based desktop solution. That's right, cloud desktop. And we'll let you know what seemingly contradictory sentence means later in the show. Plus, we have our tips, tricks, and software picks. All of this coming up right now on Destination Linux. Before we get into the community feedback, I wanted to cover why it's important that we have an episode. You're going to see a lot of gaming theme in here. And I know not everybody in the Linux world is a gamer. And while not everyone is a gamer, the adoption of Linux hinges heavily for a lot of people on being able to game. And to put this in perspective, I talked about this in other episodes, but the gaming industry is reported to be valued at $300 billion, which is more than movies and the music industry combined. And another report from Accenture, a global tech professional service company, reported that the super platform industry gaming industry, that is, they call it a super platform industry, added 500 million new gamers over the past 3 years, totaling 2.7 billion people. So even if gaming isn't the most exciting topic for you personally, stick with us because you might change your mind by the end of this episode, but you'll certainly understand why it's important that we cover this and the important events and things going on with gaming in Linux. Because at this current point, there are two operating systems that are really the gaming platform kings when it comes to a PC, and that is Linux or Windows. Mac's not in the equation. They are terrible for gaming. You can barely play anything. I have videos all out there with the new Macs, and it's very limited. So you've got Windows and you've got Linux. And so bringing Linux up in the gaming world is going to be a big deal. And a lot of people on forums and posts talk about the fact that I would switch if I could play that game on Linux, because that's the big thing holding them back. So I think that's really exciting. But before we get on with the community feedback, there's one other thing we need to cover, and that is a huge happy birthday to our very own Jill.
Oh,
Jill,
I didn't even know.
Birthday.
I didn't even know you put that in the notes.
Of course, I'm going to put that in the notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Jill.
So everyone wish Jill a very happy birthday. And Jill, I did want to bring something in because we talked before the show that you've got a special present for your birthday, which is going to be going to Disneyland. But this actually has a little bit of Linux story to it. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, the new Galaxy's Edge land that they built, all the effects for all the rides were done in Linux.
Nice.
How
So
awesome is that? This is supposed to be one of the most advanced rides, sophisticated rides ever developed. It kind of uses it's a dark ride. So kind of that dark environment. Plus you have some virtual reality type elements or maybe augmented reality type elements in it.
Correct. It's called Rise of the Resistance, and it actually has the largest theater of any dark ride in the world.
That's so cool.
You got big AT-ATs coming at you, and it's like Ryan was saying, it's not just a dark ride. You know, they've combined elements of projection and flying, dropping out of your seat. So it's a combination of many different rides, and actually it's an experience, not just a ride.
Nice.
And it was all created with Linux, with Maya, with Blender, and all the tools that Disney and Pixar use.
That is very cool. Very cool. Actually, also, I thought this was kind of funny. We didn't know that this was planned when we asked you to do this, but essentially, you're giving us a present and the community a present by doing a Jill's treasure hunt on the show. So
for your birthday.
For your birthday, which is awesome. Yeah.
You're giving us a present instead of vice versa. Yeah. You give the whole community a present. Jill, happy birthday.
Kind of awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
So in our community feedback this week, Tom from Switzerland says, "Hey DL crew, I have a comment and a question. So my comment is, as a person who's not using Linux yet, your show offers me a great window into the Linux world and allows me to get a sense of what's possible, how things work, and get a feel for the OS. Kudos from Switzerland. The question is, Linux is all about community. How can a user concerned about a privacy issue make a real impact on the development team to improve the privacy of the product if they can't contribute by doing code and that sort of thing? Contrary to features, privacy improvements affects all software users. And also, as a secondary question, will the same thing that happened with Mac also happen with Linux, with more users, higher popularity, and all that thing become a cost of privacy?" So
Darn good question.
yeah, those are some really interesting questions. Jill, what do you think about the first question related to the improvements of privacy? How can someone contribute to privacy without being like a developer and that sort of thing?
Oh, I think in testing the distro and doing documentations, doing good documentation to highlight some of the features that are better at privacy than others is one of the ways you can definitely contribute.
Oh yeah, that's very very
Yeah.
good. But the testing is I think a very interesting aspect to it, especially with the fact that in a way that the answers to this question, whether it has privacy or not, is similar to not just being a developer, because there's a lot of things you can do regardless. And I do think that the testing aspect of it can have a privacy focus, but like finding maybe there's a group that has already like a list of things you can do for testing privacy, like maybe data leakage and that sort of stuff, to be able to see like a specific testing grounds for a privacy focused test. That would be cool if that exists, and if not, maybe someone in the community would want to come up with a checklist of things to look for. That'd be very cool. But Ryan, what do you think about this one?
Well, I was thinking about my video that I did recently on privacy. It was kind of setting a foundation for privacy. A lot of fantastic feedback came from it. But what I talk about in that video is that a lot of those things I was bouncing off an InfoSec engineer. So I was bouncing those ideas off to kind of find the right balance between privacy and usability for some of the suggestions and things. And that video couldn't have happened without them. So I think kind of being an advisor to the different distributions or software, or just getting in there and being a part of the communities, whether they're utilizing Matrix or Discord or wherever they're talking about the software, you're interested in contributing to kind of being that advisor to them on the privacy aspects was super important to me, and I'm sure would be important to those who are creating the software as well.
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic point. And also that if you haven't watched that video, people, that is a fantastic video. It's like a masterclass for privacy and security online. There's a lot of information in there. Like I knew a lot of it, and then I was like, okay, let's see if Ryan has somehow figured out a way. And then he says, "Oh, I got a cybersecurity person that gave some advice and input," and like, oh, okay, then definitely I'm not going to know a lot of this stuff then. And it turns out I did not. There was quite a bit, so that was very very helpful. And awesome. the second thing question in this community feedback is about the relation to Mac and how Mac they worry about. I'll just read the question really. Will the same thing that happened to Mac also happen to Linux? More users, higher popularity at the cost of privacy. What do you think, Ryan?
This is in some ways I feel like from a software standpoint we're seeing this happen already, right? When we talk about Discord, even Steam to some extent, although I love these products and will utilize them regularly, there are metadata features and anti-privacy things kind of turned on by default. There are problems with a lot of the software that's proprietary that we're bringing on to the Linux platform. So in some ways, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It brings more people on because they're like, "Oh, Discord, shiny." Or whatever the different platform is. But at the same time, those platforms, they don't have the same focus as your traditional open source software has as far as privacy goes. So in some ways, I feel like this has kind of already taken place to a degree. And I don't know how you stop it or, without ruining part of the community that we've been able to gain from these different applications.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I would say that the platform is a little bit changed by that case, but I would say that that's more on an app side specific to like using those apps, not necessarily the platform itself. So I'm not sure what they intended by this question, but my interpretation is related to like how Mac is, while it is better privacy than Windows, it's not good privacy. They're still doing stuff that's sketchy, and that's putting it nicely. Whereas Linux is, if you want to have the most secure and privacy-oriented operating system you can, that is the Linux platform. And I think that in that perspective, that there's no way Linux could ever be affected regardless of how many users there are, how popular it is, and that sort of stuff. I don't think the privacy and the security aspects of the ecosystem or the platform could be altered or mutated or whatever to create any kind of negative situation.
Well, distro could do that, couldn't they? They could they could start tracking everything everybody's doing and become basically Windows for Linux.
I mean, an individual distro, I suppose, if you want to put it in that way, a distro could do it, but it wouldn't be affecting the entire ecosystem because there are so many different distributions. Yeah, and also not the kernel either. That's a good point, yeah. So, because you would have to convince Greg KH, Linus Torvalds, and the other people who are involved in developing the kernel to somehow change their entire philosophy and personalities and whatnot in order to make that happen. So, I think that ultimately, if we're talking about the platform itself or the ecosystem itself, that it's not even possible for this to ever be a problem as a whole. But, Ryan, you're right, as a distro concept, a distro could become super popular and then start implementing negative aspects and whatnot. But I also would say, might be a controversial statement, I don't really think that telemetry in itself is necessarily bad. Like, you can do it properly, you can do it ethically, and
Does anybody have any tomatoes to throw at Michael?
All I'm saying is that you can get, by collecting data that is anonymous, that is not remotely connected to an individual, and still like knowing how many downloads and that kind of thing. Like, for example, we don't know how many people are using any individual distro. It's kind of impossible to tell because you can download you can download the ISO from places that are not necessarily the main server, so they can't track the download. And it comes from like a torrent server or something like that where it might not be tracking it. And all these different things makes the information, when people ask like how many people are using Linux, we have no ability to actually give an answer.
I actually agree with you. I think the problem is the bridges have been burned. And now you'll see with not only privacy, but pretty much anywhere where it's like, well, yeah, it by itself isn't bad. But we know once we give in and say, okay, you can do that they're going to go full ham, which is what's happened with Windows, what happened with so many products, and start taking more stuff. Well, because now it would be interesting to know what you type in Word and what different icons you click and how you navigate through the menu. That would be interesting too, Michael. And they just keep going and going and going and going, and they never stop. And because of that, because of the abuse, people are at the point with especially something Linux where we have to protect it so hardcore that, yeah, it would be nice, but we don't trust anybody to implement it correctly.
Okay, that's fair. It has been burned quite a bit and for a long time. I guess what I'm saying is that there are certain cases where I think that people overreact to just the concept, the idea of telemetry. That doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. It can be used very well, and especially like there are some cases where there's some software in Linux and there's some distros in Linux that have telemetry that do it in the right way, where they don't collect any specific information. They don't do like location data tracking or any of that stuff. I think that there's a lot of potential there. And that's really what I'm saying. But thank you so much for the community feedback and sending the email in, Tom.
You represented Switzerland well, Tom. Those were some good questions.
Fantastic.
There.
Yeah, really good questions.
And we love hearing from our worldwide community. What we want you to do is get your official DLN mug. You can't work with any other mug. It just plain won't work.
Yeah,
fill it with some coffee or some bubbly, the official drinks of Destination Linux. Sit in your nearest stool, the official sitting, not sitting, sitting device on Destination
sitting
Linux.
Device, yeah.
And send us an email to comments@DestinationLinux.org. We want more awesome questions and comments like this coming in. Also, you can join in the community discussions on the DLN forums by going to dlnforum.com.
This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by DigitalOcean and their app platform. DigitalOcean's app platform is a solution to build modern cloud-native apps. With DigitalOcean's app platform, it has some support for multiple different programming languages, like you have Node.js, Python, Go, PHP, Ruby, and it also has support for static sites, Docker, and container images. And you get to have zero infrastructure management and high scalability. What does that actually mean? Well, you simply point your GitHub or your GitLab repository and let the app platform do all of the heavy lifting for you, like handling the infrastructure, such as app runtimes and dependencies, so you can push your code to production in just a few clicks. And it also helps automatically secure your apps by creating, managing, and renewing SSL certificates, and also protecting your apps against DDoS attacks. And with the app platform, you can run with little to no customization needed for your code because the app platform uses open cloud native standards and automatically analyzes your code, creates containers, and runs them on Kubernetes clusters. As a listener of the Destination Linux podcast and a member of the DLN community, you can get started for free. Well, no, better than free, because DigitalOcean is giving you $100 credit when you go to do.co/DLN. Again, go to do.co/DLN to get started with your $100 free credit on DigitalOcean's app platform. And we want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux.
All right, so next up in the show is everyone's favorite segment. We need some fantastic theme music here. Drum rolls, Michael. Can you do that in post?
Yeah, I'll come up with something. Maybe like it's the treasure hunt. So maybe I have like some like gold. Like,
maybe you could sing the
sounding
intro song to it from now on, and all of that. You could do a little
Jill's treasure hunt.
There you go. So Jill, I asked you to find us something in your museum that has a gaming related theme to it. What did you find in your museum for us today?
Okay. So today I brought my Ouya.
Nice.
That one's easy to hold up, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Much better than the mainframe.
Yeah. Definitely. And I have, lots of gaming devices that I can use for treasure hunt, but this one is definitely the easiest to hold. Yeah.
So what is an Ouya for people who are listening to the podcast? Maybe haven't seen one before. It's a tiny silver cube shaped device that's about the size of a coffee cup.
Exactly. So this is the Ouya is a hackable Android based micro indie game console. They advertised it as a micro game console. Obviously, look at the size,
right?
and for performance wise, that is also. And this is the micro game console that we all wished would have been more commercially successful, but wasn't. But with a little love and perseverance, you can turn this little rounded cube gem into a modern indie gaming and Linux system.
Really? You can install Linux on that thing?
Yes, you can.
Wow.
And it's getting easier. It's getting easier and easier to do that. So the Ouya was actually advertised as a new kind of video game console. That's what the ads were. And if you go to your local stores, even Best Buy had these.
I remember seeing them and they were so tempting for me to purchase, but I don't remember what the time period was. There was a lot of stuff going on with the console wars, and I thought, I'm going to wait to see if this thing ever takes off. But I remember seeing the box in Targets and Best Buys and everywhere else, and even some advertising for it and a couple YouTube videos out there of people, and it was kind of on that. It seemed like when the YouTube reviewers were doing, it was always on that verge of this could be really cool, but not yet type of thing.
Yeah, it is cool.
Okay, so, they were wrong. Got it.
Yeah, they were wrong.
Okay.
So it was created by Ouya Inc. and founded in 2012. So development was funded via Kickstarter, where it raised $8.5 million. And it was one of the website's highest earning projects in history. So that, it was, everyone wanted this little indie game console. And units started to ship to Kickstarter backers in March of 2013 and was released to the general public on June 25th, 2013 for only $99. And I thought that was a very good price point for this little indie cube.
And that came with the console there and a controller.
And the controller.
A good looking controller. It looks like a little bit cross between the Xbox controller and the Switch Pro controller.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly based off an Xbox controller. And looks like a Switch too. Yeah. Actually, you're right, Ryan, on that.
That's pretty cool. And it's very interesting. It was so cheap because it's not a lot of moolah for Ouya.
Yeah. Not a lot of moolah.
Come on, Michael.
Yeah, that was good, Michael.
Dad jokes, really.
I apologize, and also you're welcome.
Very good. I like that. So it ran a modified version of Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, with rooting being officially encouraged.
That's pretty wild. I did not know they encouraged the rooting thing.
Yes.
And it also brings me back, Jill, in your museum hunt, that we used to be excited for new Android releases when they had candy names like Jelly Bean and stuff.
Yeah.
There was actually excitement for what was happening in the Android operating system,
Yes.
unlike today where nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the other cool thing is it had a custom game menuing system called the Ouya Discover Store. And it was actually very unique in that you could try the games before you bought them. So the Ouya company actually required on initial release that there was some kind of free-to-play aspect, whether it be game demos, they be freeware, or had purchasable upgrades, levels, or other in-game items. So that made this game console very unique, because the hacking and giving the software to the people was definitely very important to them.
Why do you think this device failed from a popularity standpoint back then?
Oh boy. So there's just there were a lot of reasons. A lot of people felt that the software wasn't baked. It had lots of annoying little paper cuts and bugs, and the menu was disorganized, and it really felt a little bit like early access. It didn't bother me because I was already into hacking and everything, but the general public, that was hard for them to access, go through the menus.
Yeah.
And actually, the game controller was actually very weak. It had issues with buttons getting stuck. The touchpad was, too sensitive, and it would interfere with your gameplay.
Oh, wow. So that top portion in between the two sticks is touchpad?
Yeah, that's the touchpad. And most of us, got other controllers, which I did for it as well.
Yeah.
And, the response of the controller was also very slow. It was Bluetooth, but this particular controller was very slow to respond. So, when you're trying to play a first-person shooter, it was a little difficult because you didn't have that snap. But another reason was at launch, there weren't a lot of games available. I actually personally love the selection of games because I love the indie games, but the general public wanted more popular games, of course.
Right, Call of Duty. Where's my Call of Duty and Fortnite? Yeah. Gotcha.
And ultimately, Ouya sales were not good, causing financial problems for Ouya and forcing the company to wind down the business, which was really, really sad. But the good news is its software assets were sold to Razer, who announced the discontinue of the console in July 2015. So
wow, Razer got involved in this. I did not know that.
I think we should contact Razer maybe, and ask them to make a new version of it, or like kind of like a reinvention of the Ouya, and they can make it you call it a new generation, I guess. You could call it the Ouya Tuya.
Yeah.
Ouya Tuya. Wow. Man, Michael, you're on a roll. So I feel like I'm on Hardware Addicts all of a sudden with all this.
Cool.
When you celebrate wins in the games, you know how like some games have these wins that are like, for example, like PUBG has a celebratory thing at the end of it, right? What in this, when you win something in an Ouya, do you say booyah?
Stop, Mike.
Okay. Sorry.
You're in timeout.
I'm getting carried away. I'm glad I'm glad you didn't say you're gonna sue you.
All right, so Jill, Razer purchases this company's assets and then releases the code out to the public.
So what happens? The Ouya marketplace actually stopped working when Razer stopped support in June of 2019. Actually, it's fairly recently.
Okay.
So what's really awesome, the Internet Archive devs stepped up and made an updated marketplace API so that you can access all the archived games.
That's pretty cool.
Through the Internet Archive.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Rock on.
It's not a very hard fix either, which was really nice. Yeah, speaking of which, there's so many cool things that you can do with the Ouya today. Yeah, you can update the software now, which is really nice.
That helps. Yeah.
Over at the XDA developers forums websites, there are lots of newer Android ROMs and mods made for the Ouya, and you can access all the games from the Google Play Store, which is really great.
Cool.
That is very cool.
And
I'm glad it's not like completely, all the stuff is completely gone. That is really
It's
awesome.
amazing when they create an open platform like this, where they encourage you to hack it and don't make it some ridiculous process.
Yeah.
That these products that somebody obviously poured a lot of their love and intelligence into creating is still alive today because they didn't try to lock it down and make it ridiculous to get into.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
One of the really special things that's happened is recently the Linux kernel 5.11 on February 14th of this year officially supports the Ouya. So it's going to be even easier now for people to make distros for the Ouya.
That's awesome.
And definitely easier to install. I've been using, Ubuntu and Debian on it from a flash drive, but it was tricky to get installed. But for us Linux people, it's not that difficult.
Right.
But it's going to be nice when someone comes out with an official distro, made for it. It'll just, you could boot it from a live USB.
Yeah. And when you finally got it to run, where you're like, booyah.
Yeah.
Oh man, Michael, you infected me. Oh gosh.
Okay. So I knew you would be down with it.
Yeah. And another really cool feature of it is it came stock with many game emulators were installed by default. So you could play Nintendo 64 games or PlayStation.
Very cool.
And other retro console games. So the software was really, really robust. It just wasn't really refined.
Right.
And the other cool thing about it, because of its, hackability, it wasn't just in software that Ouya wanted to make it hackable. All the systems can be used as development kits, allowing any Ouya owner to also be a developer without the need for licensing fees. And that was a first in the industry as well, especially at that time, 2012. That was
What's
really
amazing
cool.
with this device is I would still rather own that device, being as old as it is, than a Google Stadia. I'd rather invest my money there. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And, my history with it is I had sideloaded lots of Android APK apps on my Ouya, including Plex and Netflix. I played a lot of my favorite games on it, like Race the Sun, Fez, The Cave, Broken Age, Hyperlight Drifter, and Towerfall, which is a fun multiplayer game, which launched with the Ouya as an exclusive game. So there were quite a few games that were launched exclusively on the Ouya, and most of those now you can play on Steam under Linux. So that makes me happy.
That's awesome. I really like Race the Sun. You mentioned that. I was like, oh yeah, Race the Sun is awesome.
One of my it was one of the first games on Steam Linux. So that was really cool. And I still love playing it. And I also used to use it to watch Twitch, YouTube, and Linux podcasts.
So it's a little pretty powerful processor in there to be able to pull all that off.
So speaking of which, this has a very special processor in it. The NVIDIA Tegra 3.
Oh, that explains
1.7 gigahertz.
Okay, so they're using like the Shield processor inside.
Exactly.
Got it.
It had, out of the box, this one has 1 gig of DDR3 RAM, 8 gigs of internal flash memory. They made one later that had 16. And it's got an HDMI port and an NVIDIA GeForce ultra low powered GPU. So
wow, all packed into that. Does that thing get super hot at all?
No, it does have a fan, and the fan is a little noisy. And there have been mods. People put Noctua fans in them.
I love it. I love it.
So you have a fan that's larger than the actual console.
I might get an Ouya here because I see them on eBay for about $150 and water cool the thing just because.
Yes. Yeah. So here's actually the cool thing is yesterday I was checking and I found some used ones you could buy for $50.
Yeah.
So that's just like a Raspberry Pi, you'll have something you can play with and hack, and with a pretty powerful processor in it.
That's amazing because you said 2012 this came out.
Yes. Yeah. And
wow,
Steam
this
for
was ahead of its time in a lot of
yeah.
ways. From that
Yeah.
perspective.
Very
Yeah.
much so. So, Steam for Linux was just starting to ramp up. So, and this
Yeah.
was, a lot of a lot of the games on here again, actually, I'd say 99% of them, you could play on Linux.
Very
And it's
cool.
because they, developed them. Some of them were developed for this unit.
All
Yeah.
right.
So it was really, this is really a special little device.
It really is. I
Yeah.
had no idea. I honestly had no clue how cool of a device this was. I'd heard so many negative things when it
Yeah.
first released that I really was like, okay, I'm just not going to buy it. Even
Yeah.
I remember it going on sale on Targets where they were just trying to clear them out, and I still didn't pick one up. Now I regret that.
Yeah, it's. I think it's because it had like a lot of people saying it was like very underpowered and whatnot, but it wasn't trying to compete with like an Xbox or anything.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a micro console.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Jill, this was a particularly interesting museum find for me because this is a device that would taunt me every time I would pass it in the store. I never pulled the trigger, which is rare for me to buy one. And now I realize what I missed out on. And I'm going to probably have to go pick one up anyways
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's pretty cool. So
So
thank you
worth
for
it.
sharing that awesome find with us.
You
That
you
was-
might even have to get a Ouya.
Yeah.
Michael,
get a few.
go to timeout. Think about what you're doing. So this week I was doing some reading and I was reading the Linux Mint monthly news blog. And I came across something I personally had not heard of before or seen or played with. And it was talking about Mint partnering with a company called Shells.com, which essentially makes a virtual desktop available from anywhere where you have an internet connection for its users on a monthly subscription basis and has a multitude of Linux distributions to choose from and also some options to even test and upload your own distros of choices they don't have. Linux Mint, for instance, is currently in beta for shells.com, but they have Debian, Ubuntu, Manjaro, along with several other choices. And I found this particularly interesting because at work, we use something called Citrix Zen Desktop, which allows users to basically have a much more powerful than your standard laptop access from their own bring your own device type setup. So they have their own computer, but they log into the Citrix Zen Desktop and have a virtual work computer, which has all the software they need, their email, all the applications in this virtual space. And there have been situations in which employees have been able to use their phone or tablet to get an email out while they're out at the grocery store after hours, or be able to work on something while they're on a plane because of this kind of virtual desktop environment. So it's has very powerful capabilities to have something like that. You obviously, the local device's memory, battery life, CPU are not as heavily taxed as they would if you're running all of this stuff natively. So you can use a much more lower powered device, Chromebooks, those type of level of powered devices, even maybe the Ouya to log in, definitely the Ouya, to log into a much more powerful virtual desktop machine. So I was pretty blown away by this. I reached out to shells.com. I'm like, hey, this thing's pretty cool. I'd like the host to check it out. They were super kind and sent us some keys to play with this for the next month or so and check out what it's all about. I played with it this week, but I'm really curious to see what you all think about this. So, Jill, let me start with you. Had you heard about shells.com and what did you think about it after playing with it?
What's funny is I heard about the same way you did, Ryan, on the Linux Mint blogs. So I was curious about it too.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed. It is really, really awesome and it runs really fast.
It really is fast, like surprisingly fast. Even to spin up a brand new machine was seconds. And I was like, it's no way it's ready already. No, it was ready. It
was ready. And it's just so nice to have an option of a desktop based cloud VM, a desktop one, not necessarily a networking one or one for Kubernetes or, Docker, but a desktop one.
Yeah.
And I'd been playing with the Ubuntu 20.04.2 LTS shells, but that one is beta on their website. But it worked great. And I used it on my Firefox web browser, on one of my computers with Ubuntu 20.4.2. I was amazed by the speed of it. And it also had really cool features, like it has a virtual send clipboard button in the drop-down menu from the top for cutting and pasting from your local OS into your shell's OS. Very, very convenient.
That is nice.
Especially when you want to do code too.
Yeah.
And what was also cool is when you select and copy text from the terminal or elsewhere in shells, it copies it to the clipboard on your local machine.
That is very nice.
I was surprised. I didn't realize it would do that. So, because we're used to classic VMs where you got to, sometimes make a note, use a virtual noting system to transfer back and forth.
I also noticed the one of the cool things that I saw was the virtual keyboard part of that drop down thing. That was very nice.
Yeah, and it has also a drop down button to mute your sound, which is really nice, and it has a mic input setting, which that brings up a lot of possibilities for doing remote, maybe remote podcasting or some kind of WebRTC.
That's interesting.
Yeah, what's interesting is I got the basic yearly, which is what the 30 days was for, which is the basic yearly. And that means it was one virtual CPU, 40 gigabyte SSD, and 2 gigs of RAM. And I was able to actually record a video and render it in Kdenlive with that one virtual CPU, 40 gigabytes of SSD. Obviously that worked, but 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's pretty impressive.
Are you saying that you had Kdenlive on the Shell's VM? And
correct.
Then, okay.
And rendered it right there in the Shell's VM.
Very interesting.
And with one virtual CPU. So it's quite powerful virtual CPU.
Awesome.
I don't know what kind it is that specifically they're using, that they're splitting up into these vCPUs, but it was pretty impressive because generally they have a more powerful option that's meant for that. They have a Pro, which is 4 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM, and that would be more what you would want to pick if you were going to do that regularly. But I thought it was impressive that their basic could at least handle that rendering out.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Really amazing. I used the GIMP in it and did some animations in the GIMP just to play around. And yeah, again, I was impressed. It worked as well as a local virtual machine.
What's neat about this is, let's say somebody also has, they don't have the financial capability to buy a really expensive machine right now. So if you go buy a $50 used laptop on eBay, there's going to be a lot of things that's going to be really hard for you to get working. But you get this in that $495 a month plan here, and you have access to a more powerful machine right from a browser. It kind of opens up some more capabilities there potentially as well. They have data centers in Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, Amsterdam, and Tokyo. The Pro yearly ends up being $36.95 a month if you want the 4 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM, and the Plus is $19.95 with 2 virtual cores, 80 gigabytes of RAM, or 80 gigabytes of storage, and 4 gigabytes of RAM. Overall, really good prices, and I enjoyed it. Now, I did have one issue, and it sounds like it was just me because Michael did not have this issue, where I did a Manjaro KDE, and my keyboard would not work, my actual physical keyboard, in typing into the browser. And I tried 2 different browsers, but when I switched to XFCE, I had no issues at all. All of my keyboard, everything was translating across. But Michael, you used Manjaro KDE and did not have that issue at all. So
yeah, I tried it. I tried KDE and Manjaro, also Kubuntu, and I tried some other ones. One of the things I liked about Shell is that if you tested out an operating system, you could just go into the settings and do like this. There's a reinstall button, and at the bottom of that it says, "You want to change your operating system?" Like, yes, I do. I want to try them all. So I did that a couple of times, and it doesn't take very long to switch out the entire system. So that's another really cool aspect of it. But when I tested it with the keyboard and everything, I didn't see any obvious issues. And in fact, I did a test for Kubuntu specifically where I did some typing in Kate and see if it could keep up with me and that sort of stuff, because I expected there's some kind of delay. And while there was a tiny delay, it was a delay to notice it enough, it did not interfere with my touch typing aspects, because, a lot of people who are touch typists will see as they're typing, and if it doesn't keep up with their hands, it, throws them off a bit.
Right.
And this one was I'd say 97% real time. You could tell it was slightly off, but it wasn't too bad. You could totally do it just fine.
Now, Casey in our chat brings up a good point about the fact that any web-enabled device you can access your desktop with. So if you need your files on the go anywhere, you can access it from your phone. And I tested this with the iPhone. I was able to open a browser, get into Shells, log into my desktop, go into my documents, and look at a file that I had created there right from just my phone. Now, is it super convenient to see a whole desktop on a phone? No. But they did it as good as you possibly could. And if you're in an emergency to get a document to somebody because you forgot to email it or forgot to send it out, you could do it. That's the point. Now on a tablet, it would be much better.
Yeah, and
wait a second. We have to know, did you test this? And if you didn't, you need to go test this after the show. Can you edit the video in Kdenlive from your phone through this VM? That's the real question.
I'll do it. Don't you challenge me, sir. Yeah. It's been thrown. Yeah, but you can any web-enabled device. So if you have an Android tablet, a iPad laying around, you can access your desktop from that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and the other thing I thought was really cool is that there's other services out there that do similar to what Shells does, but the alternatives, like there's JS Linux that runs. But that runs using an emulator written in JavaScript. It is free, but it's really slow. So right. This is the first one I've seen that's performant.
Yeah, I mean, I was performant no matter what DE I threw at it. So and also no matter what distro I picked to do it. With GNOME or with KDE Plasma, XFCE, it was all just. There was an obvious delay. Like you could tell that it is a remote machine, but it is not. It is so faster than you would have expected it to be. Like that's what that's what surpurprised me.
I was waiting for the mouse click, and then you wait 2 seconds, and then
exactly.
But it didn't. It moved. It
felt like less than a second per
less than a second. Yeah. Because when I was drawing in the GIMP, it was keeping track.
Well, we're going to have the folks from shells.com on because they were telling me that they have a lot of exciting things happening that they want to talk to the audience about after we had a chance to play with it. I wanted to have us have a chance to test it first before just to kind of get our initial thoughts. But I was pretty excited about this whole product and concept and idea, not only from a business perspective, but I kind of just want to have a desktop that has some of the files I need to access on the go from anywhere right there. I mean, I could be at a ball game, right, where I'm watching my son play baseball or whatever with an iPad, messing around with my virtual desktop and seeing what's rendering out, especially if I had the Pro Edition for rendering a video and being able to post. I mean, there's just a lot of things you could do with this there. So I think it's awesome. And I love that it's Linux based.
Yeah. And one of the really exciting things about it is you can import your VMs from your desktop.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
And that was really, when I found that in there, like, ooh.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
That's powerful. Yeah.
It also, I think it said it has this weird operating system. I can't remember if it's, maybe I pronounced this wrong. Windows? I don't know.
Yeah, but after the Bill Gates and Melinda divorce, you only get half of.
Yeah, you only get half of the.
The other half was taken in the divorce thing, so you only get half a screen.
So you either get win or doze.
Yeah, you get win or doze. Yeah. Like those poor billionaires, our hearts go out to them. We hope they make it through this. Tough time.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough out there.
Really sad. And thanks to all the news organizations for covering such important news. But back to Shells. Go check out Shells. If you've never played with a virtual desktop before, definitely check out Shells. I was very impressed.
Yeah, and absolutely check it out. And I think that there's going to be a lot of questions that people have on this. But as Ryan said, we're going to have some people from Shells on the show in the future. And be sure to go to the DLN the forum thread for this episode. I have a link in the show notes that where you can provide your questions. If you have any questions that you would like us to ask to the Shells representative, we'll just put that in the thread, and we will collect them all together and disseminate them. Or whatever.
We'll make Shells go through the gauntlet of questionnaire, right?
Yeah, we will spin up a bunch of VMs for each question or whatever. I don't know.
There we go.
Anyway, I was going for a dad joke there. It didn't land. So
none of them have so far, which is not unusual.
Okay, this one didn't land, but I'll just go into my shell and.
Oh man, you're so good. You're so good.
This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by Bitwarden. You can get started right now by going to bitwarden.com/DLN. Bitwarden is a fantastic software because it is a password manager that allows you to have peace of mind knowing that your online accounts are secure. How does it do that? Well, it provides a bunch of tools. For example, you want to store all your passwords. You need to have a bunch of different passwords because you want a different password for every website. Actually, every account on every website, and that's a lot to keep up with. So they provide you with a secure password vault that you can store it all in, and they automatically generate those passwords for you with the password generator tool, and they even provide the ability to automatically fill in those passwords on login forms so you don't have to do that. And you can have access to all of this across multiple different types of devices, like your web browser extensions, mobile apps, desktop application, and even on the command line if you want to do that. And Bitwarden seals and encrypts your data on your own machine with end-to-end encryption before it ever leaves those devices so that you know you're the only person who has access to that data. So go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started with your free account. But I think you want to check out the premium account because there's a lot of extra stuff in there, tons of great stuff, and it's ridiculously well priced. Like, it's less than $1 per month. You can get it for just $10 per year, get 1 gigabyte encrypted file storage, 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F Duo, Vault Health Reports, Bitwarden Authenticator for temporary one-time passwords, priority customer service, and so much more. So make the smart move like many of the community have and go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started with your Bitwarden account. To make sure that you have your passwords and other sensitive data, just having peace of mind over that is just fantastic. And also, you'll be able to support a company that truly gets open source because I actually forgot to mention somehow, Bitwarden is 100% open source software. So
Yay!
You're getting a great service and also supporting a company that truly gets open source and letting them know that you appreciate them sponsoring Destination Linux.
In our gaming section this week, we've invited a very special guest to the show. Our very own Matt from GameSphere is here. Yay, Matt, we love you. And if you're not subscribed to GameSphere yet, you should be. So make sure to go do that. Matt is currently doing curated picks and game discussion with all the hosts across the Destination Linux network, including me and Ryan and Michael.
Which one was your favorite, Matt?
The one that didn't involve you, Ryan.
Oh, got him.
So, Michael, I got it.
I wasn't even. We haven't done that one yet.
I was gonna say we haven't done that one. Actually, Michael, you're up next. Just so you know.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you letting me know live on the stream.
Exactly.
So, Matt, welcome to the show as always.
Glad to be here.
So we would like to know, tell us about this recent news with PlayStation and Discord.
So the long short of it is anybody who's used Sony and their proprietary backend for communication is calling it annoying is an understatement. So how many times have you logged in to play a PlayStation game? You have to use either the built-in PlayStation web store web app to use Discord, which is annoying, or you have to have it on your phone, on a PC, et cetera, et cetera. What they're doing is they're looking to integrate Discord as a one solution stop. So you can be playing cross-platform games. So if you're playing on Xbox or PlayStation or PC, and you can use Discord as the sole way of communicating across all three of those platforms, as opposed to having these kind of Mumble or TeamSpeak or Ventrilo or 15 different ways to try to communicate across platforms and different ways of doing it. So I think having one stop shop basically in that particular case is actually a very good thing, because we always hear about how all the consoles and all the PCs and all that stuff are going, oh, we want to have cross-platform play and all this other stuff. Well, this kind of proves that. I'm not going to lie.
And from a Linux standpoint, this is a big deal because you now, if you're on a PC and you're on Linux in that PC, you can use Discord in Linux. Mm-hmm. And so now you could talk with your friends who maybe only have a PlayStation and Xbox and those things. And cross-platform games like Fortnite is one that comes to mind, but there's several others that you can play across all these platforms. You all have one communication hub that you all can hang out in, despite the fact you're on completely different platforms.
That is pretty cool.
Really cool.
Yeah.
With this, Sony's looking at to have this integrated around 2022. It's not going to happen relatively soon.
Rude.
I would expect it mostly with the PlayStation 5 more than probably the PS4, just because of probably that's where most of Sony's development stuff is going to be going forward to within the next few years anyway. Unfortunately, there's the life cycle of consoles as it is. So with that, though, Sony also put a minority investment into Discord. So I think that might have shaken up the whole talk about Microsoft's buying Discord stuff, and that might have thrown potentially a kink in that hole.
This was a pretty smooth move from Sony from that aspect, because they didn't have to buy Discord outright and spend that money to do so. They just kind of gave them some money and then got something in return for it, but keeps Discord safe from an acquisition, at least in the short term, from a competitor. And we know Microsoft is buying up everything they can in the game world and, doing pretty well from it, actually, taking over a lot of these studios and things. I mean, the gamers might not feel like they're doing well with it, but financially they're doing great with their acquisitions that they're making. So.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm intrigued to see where this goes. Sony is hit or miss when it comes to what they promise, what they deliver. So I'm curious to see where this actually ends up. But I think if they stay true to what it's supposed to be and should be, this is a good thing for all gamers across every platform that Discord supports.
Yeah. I would love to see Sony. I mean, Microsoft is making their big play in that there are no exclusives, they say, because you can play their games on Windows or an Xbox. So that's their definition of no exclusive.
No exclusive to their own platforms.
Yeah. Not that you could play it on Sony or other things, but just that you could play it on every game that they release. You're going to be able to play on Windows or Xbox. This is a big thing for them. I think it's a big deal. Whether you're on a laptop or you're at home on a console, you're going to be able to play the same game, start from where you're at, etc. I feel like Sony's big play here is, what's the next big gaming operating system out there? It's definitely not Mac.
Mm-hmm.
It's Max Game.
Yeah, it's Linux. So why not Sony, take some of these amazing IPs that they have and make them all Linux compatible and use Steam and Linux as their gaming platform. I feel like being FreeBSD, isn't that what PlayStation's OS is based on already? This would not be a huge jump in technology for them and would make a huge wave as far as competition goes. And then you get the desktop aspect, you get the console aspect for both sides, right? Windows and Xbox versus Sony PlayStation and Linux.
And it seems like
I know which side I'm picking.
Yeah, it seems like a massive opportunity for Sony, because they have Microsoft has the Windows and the Xbox approach, and Sony is just competing against the Xbox, and they could, with an easy situation of partnering with some distros maybe, or just being on the Linux ecosystem, you automatically get a ton of people promoting your stuff for doing it. And then you also can partner with Valve to make some fantastic interconnection and partnership stuff. Like, it seems like such a good idea. It's surprising that they haven't even considered it.
It's such a good idea. No corporation would ever actually do it, because it's too good of an idea. It makes too much sense to happen.
I'm just happy that Microsoft wasn't buying them.
Yeah, definitely.
They're staying independent.
I think the thing with Sony is that you're seeing them start to test the waters when it comes to they're putting their own games on different services. They put out Horizon Zero Dawn on Steam not that long ago. They put out, they're looking to put out Days Gone on PC, Steam specifically. Microsoft, pros and cons, obviously there are certain games that they have actually made. I'll give them credit where it's due. Things like the Master Chief Collection, where you can actually disable EAC or Easy Anti-Cheat to play the single player and unranked multiplayer, is awesome. I will give them credit there. Things like Recore, which was another Xbox One exclusive, works flawlessly on Proton. I've been playing that recently. So every company, it does what it does, obviously, at the end of the day, for the bottom line. Whether or not they engage the Linux community, I want to see more game studios specifically do what the Hello Games did with No Man's Sky, where they're like, oh, well, we notice people are using Proton, So they literally went in and fixed an issue that was 100% related to specifically to Proton, and they went and patched it and fixed it and fixed the game for
that's pretty cool, right?
And that to me is where I would like to see more. So that stuff right there is really, really cool to me.
So do you think
that's why you're the host of GameSphere? Points like that.
Sure.
Yes.
I did not know that they did that. That is awesome to hear. I am curious, do you think that that is a viable option for game developers for like the Linux community to contact game developers and try to get them to focus on Proton support, not necessarily native? Do you think that that's a practical way of doing it?
I think the transition layers that Proton gets called quite frequently is helpful because the subsystem is more generic to a Windows environment that they would be used to potentially fixing. I mean, obviously it's different because it's making Windows calls and translating to Linux calls and all the other stuff, but the underlying structure is something they would probably be more familiar with to try to fix than, say, native Linux, and the tools would more than likely be able to help fix on Proton than they would on a straight Linux system where you're using different tools and different things, different compilers, different, take your pick. Yeah. So I think Proton, with all its strengths and weaknesses, I think is a better target platform as a overall for the Linux ecosystem, just to potentially get stuff going. You can make the debate about native and Proton and et cetera, et cetera. That comes down to what you preference more than anything else.
Sure.
Yeah, Matt. So thank you so much for those insights. And for those that are unfamiliar with GameSphere, what's the show about?
Oh, geez, the elevator pitch. So yes. the short version of the show is we're taking everyone across the network and we're looking to get to know them more on kind of a personal level. But in order to do that, you kind of need to know what like their hobbies, their favorites, their what they like to do outside of Linux and all the fun things that we do outside of it. Brian actually has interest in pretty much everything you see in the background, so he's pretty easy to tell.
And mine is you got like 4 options to look at.
Right. I've already nailed yours down, so I'm not too concerned about you.
All right,
but it's like Jill, yours is very specific to you. It's taking everyone's kind of experiences and trying to tailor a game recommendation outside of what they might normally play by using what they normally like outside of gaming. So we recently had Eric on, and that episode is actually, we're doing Terminator Resistance because he's a first-person sci-fi fan.
Nice.
So, but he's been in a big like Oblivion, Skyrim kick. So I was like, okay, we'll take your love of sci-fi, and we'll go from there. And that'll be released sometime this coming week. So,
I think this is really important for this whole episode. We've had this kind of underlying theme of gaming, and a lot of people will say, well, I'm not a gamer. And I really think that it's because they haven't found the right type of game for them, because there are so many varieties of games. I mean, if you're a lover of chess, right, on like playing a game of chess on a compuper, you're a gamer, right?
Yeah. Simulator.
There's literally a game on Steam called 5D Chess.
Nice.
Where you can go backwards and forwards. Take the 3D chess from like Star Trek and like amplify the complexity by like 2. It's awesome. So you don't know you're a gamer until you actually try combining the stuff that you are interested in and trying to find a game that is wrapped around it. Mm-hmm. And that to me is something that I want more people to experience gaming, because really at the end of the day, gaming as a medium is very, very fun. It's entertaining. It's helpful with like hand-eye coordination, your problem solving and everything around it. So there's a lot of benefits to it. So, and Ryan, you talked about how like, your son enjoys Fortnite and all that stuff. So like there's so many different avenues that gaming can approach from, not just strictly
spending time with your kids, right?
Not a strict fun entertainment value, which don't get me wrong. I'm a single player, don't like people kind of gamer. But on the same note, there are times where Ryan, Michael, and I we've played Ballistic Overkill, we've played Warframe, and there's just a fun atmosphere, community that you can build around gaming.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't know it until they realize it. You know how many people didn't think they were gamers until they picked up a Guitar Hero game or
Yeah.
and
it's a networking opportunity as well. You meet people from all across the world, all different professions. If it's actually as good as, people would tell you back in the day, if you wanted to get a, network built, go out there on the golf course and golf with some people. Well, now it's gaming. I game with lawyers, doctors, all kinds of professions out there. You could actually build your network through gamers, unless you're a troll and nobody likes you. But if you're nice and you hang out, and help people, you could build a network.
It's actually pretty interesting points about like the whole concept of the, getting people who are not necessarily gamers interested in gaming and just checking it out. Because I wouldn't really classify myself as a gamer because I play like one game mostly.
Rocket League.
No. You play one game only. Let's be real.
It's like 97%.
You're the literal definition of it. A gamer.
Yeah.
Games are gamer.
It's like 96, 97% one game. There's
99.
There's some sprinkles here and there. I do dabble a little bit, but it's mostly one game. But
Rocket League, by the way.
Yes, it's that game. But it's also a game that when I first saw that game, I thought this was nonsense. Like I would never play. This is so ridiculous. Car soccer, whatever. I don't care about soccer. I don't care about cars. Then I played it and like, oh, well, I don't know why I like this, but I do. And and you combine that with like, you just don't, if people who are not necessarily gamers just don't give it a chance to try something new, then they might never realize that they could be gamers on a particular genre, a particular style. There's so many different things, plus the whole, like you said, the hand-eye coordination. That game is 100% about hand-eye coordination, and there's also other factors of just like experiencing story games. Like I'm a huge fan of drama stories and stuff like that, and like just complex stories. So like The Witcher is such a cool game that I wouldn't have played otherwise. And
of course, the networking point goes out the window with Rocket League specifically, because you'd only be networking with 3-year-olds. But every other game you mentioned, they're totally an opportunity to network with.
Says the dad who helps play Fortnite.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
Fortnite is a national treasure, sir.
A national treasure. No, thank you. No, thank you. That game is owned by Epic Games, and so is the one that I'm talking about too. So that's not a good
We're
point.
both networking with 3-year-olds. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Aw, we need to all co-op and play Serious Sam games together.
There you go.
Yeah, we got to be serious, people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, go check out GameSphere. It's an awesome podcast. It's such a unique take on gaming. And if you count yourself as one of those that's not a gamer, you could still get a lot of information from the host that you may not have known as he goes through the network and starts interviewing each person and their game likes. And Matt, you've done such an awesome job. You're also on DLN Xtend, and thank you for all the work that you do on the network.
I appreciate being on the network. It's always fun talking to you guys. Always fun making fun of Michael specifically here.
Especially Michael. Yeah.
Wait,
we agree with that. Best segment ever. Best segment ending ever.
So let's stick to the gaming theme of the show with a software spotlight, and we're going to talk about a game. So we're going to spotlight a game this week.
I like it.
And that is Hedgewars. So Hedgewars is actually an open source game that is probably in your software repository. Hedgewars is a turn-based strategy, artillery, action, and comedy game. So it features the antics of pink hedgehogs with attitude as they battle with the depths of Hades to the not really depths of space, but like the whatever they go to
space.
Frontiers. Yeah. The final frontier of space. Yeah, for sure. Anyone familiar with the game Worms will find themselves in love with Hedgewars. It's very similar. So it's a great game to play with your friends, and maybe in a big style multiplayer thing like the DLN Game Fest, we could add it to the next one.
Absolutely.
There's potential.
I think we have to. Did you get to play this at all this week? Because it is stupid fun.
Yeah,
I've played it
bit,
before.
Yeah. And the controls are tough.
Very tough. I love the sound effects.
Yes,
it has the worm sound effects.
And this is a free game. It's available in your repository, likely in your distro. And if it's not, then slap your distro. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. Request from your distro developer. Nicely ask for them to add it in. But it's a really fun, well done game. And what is the tank game we played on DLN Game
Shell
Fest?
Shock, I think.
Shell Shock.
Shell Shock. It's that same concept where you're trying to blow people up with different things, but it's, pink hedgehogs with attitudes. It's not
Pink hedgehogs with attitudes, and it's morphin time or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why with attitudes somehow reminds me of that show from the 90s.
Now, Jill, are you
Whatever.
good at this game? Because that's going to determine whether we.
Yeah, exactly. Good question.
Well, I did play Worms a lot, and I have played Hedgewars. Not quite as much as Worms, but it's the same, mechanic.
so
I think what she's saying is that she will destroy us.
Yeah, well, I'm doing teams. Jill's on my team. Michael, Noah versus me and Jill.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
that's not. Yeah. That's we gotta like flip a coin. Who gets Jill?
Sounds like a good plan.
Cool.
So our tip and trick of the week is also gaming related. If you want to increase the gaming experience in Linux, the tip is to use game mode in order to increase that performance on your PC. Game mode is a daemon lib combo for Linux that allows games to request a set of optimizations basically for your OS so that it's performing at its optimal capabilities. And it's very easy to install. You're going to install game mode and the lib32 game mode packages. So if you're in Fedora, you DNF search for game mode or DNF search lib32 game mode, and you'll see some of the packages there that you can run. Once that's done, I think the easiest way is just to open up Steam and right click on it, go into the properties, and it has those run options in there, launch options that you can enter, and just put game mode run and then the command %. So basically command is surrounded in percents. We'll have it in the show notes. So you can just grab it and slap it into that launch option. And that's going to make sure that that game is running in game mode. And I was testing this week to see how big of a difference is. It was substantial.
Oh, yeah.
In some cases, 20 to 30 more frames per second, like huge.
I was just going to say that, Ryan, 20, 30. I've even found 50 and 60 on some games.
Right. So if you have a particular game that seems to not be, it runs, but it kind of runs not at the level of hardware that you have, really give this game mode a try. It's pretty awesome. You can also launch this in games that are outside of Steam using game mode run and then the / in the name of the game to kick it off there. So very cool if you're into gaming and want to get the most performance out of your Linux machine.
Yeah, that is very cool. And also some distributions have it by default, like it's just pre-installed. So maybe if you have a distribution that has that, you could check it out. And if not, definitely take. I think also didn't Feral Interactive make this? Because they did. So that's another thing that Feral has made. Like Feral is known for porting games to Linux and making native versions of the games. So thank you very much for that, and also thank you very much for making game mode.
Yeah, and even if your distro has it installed, make sure to still put that command in for your Steam options to enable it so that it's running when you kick off the game.
Yeah,
so just FYI.
I just have a script that runs on every distribution I use.
Did you open source that script for the rest of us too?
No.
Okay, we'll talk about that after the show, Jill. Really? You kept it proprietary, Jill? That's unbelievable.
Oh, I haven't put it on my Git yet.
Okay, well, we're waiting for it to get there. A big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces. And if you want more DL, become a patron like all of these beautiful people with us here today in the 65,000 square foot virtual stadium we have purchased here. Each person gets 5 square feet of that becomes a patron of that virtual stadium.
And they get to join us in the Skybox too.
In the Skybox. Yeah, you get unedited versions of the show, VIP access to events. We have a patron after show right after that you can hang out with the crew and ask a bunch of questions and probably want to talk to Jill and not me and Michael. And that's okay. We only cry about it after the show ends. But
that's why we have Jill in the show, so we can too.
Yeah, exactly. So become a patron. You can become on Patreon or sponsors.
Yep. And in addition, every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, we are live at DLNLive.com. So, and also, everyone is invited to join us at DLNLive.com each and every week for the recording of Destination Linux podcast. And we can't wait to see you in the chat on the live stream at DLNLive.com. And also go to DLNStore.com. You can pick up a bunch of swag. Like, for example, Jill has the new Linux 91 shirt on and showing off the camper mug. And also, somehow, Ryan is repping the active sitting shirt, which is interesting.
I hate stools, but I'll wear the shirt.
And there's tons of great stuff there. We have T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers, hats, and even aprons now. Check it. So, like for example, if you want to represent different shows for the different things, we have like This Week in Linux or Twill, so you can twill while you grill. All sorts of options you can do
What
by
is
going
wrong with
to
you today?
DLNstore.com. You're welcome again.
So we have so many amazing shows here on the Destination Linux Network. We have the Pseudo Show, the Ask Noah Show, This Week in Linux, the DOS Geek Channel, Represent,
Yeah, Jeff.
DLN Xtend, Hardware Addicts, and get your game on with our latest show, GameSphere. And we
That's
just
right.
talked to our host, Matt of GameSphere. So make sure to check those out. And so go to DestinationLinux.Network and subscribe to all these shows to keep those penguins marching in the full Monty of Linux and open source awesome sauce. And DLN Xtend will be doing a live show on May 19th. So make sure to join everyone in chat for that.
That's going to be an awesome time. And everybody have a great week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
And since Noah wasn't able to join us this week,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
There we go.
I love his little chirp. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
That show was stupid fun. All right, patrons, turn
Yeah,
on your
it was.
mics, turn on your video. Let's talk.
Fun.
Oh my God.
Michael had it was you were on today, Michael.
I had so many dad jokes, and I had no plan of doing that because we neither one of us, Ryan nor I, knew what she was going to be showing us with the Ouya. So all of those dad jokes are on the fly. That is the skill.
There were some good dad jokes.
That doesn't make it more impressive. It really doesn't. It would have been sad if you had actually planned them out and they were that bad, you know?
Yeah. Whoa. There's no such thing as a dad joke. How dare you?
Oh.
Angus in the YouTube chat is saying, are Michael's dad jokes copyrighted? I will let you know that they are Creative Commons for sure. Feel free to use them as much as you want.
But don't. Please don't.
Actually, as much as you want.
You know what? I'm convinced now that some things should be proprietary.
I updated my Fedora to 34 this week. That was interesting.
How did it go, Michael?
For the most part, it went quite well. I also tried out the new the Plasma Wayland experience in 34, and I can say that.
All right, wait, stop.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
For everybody else who wants to know the rest of the story, this is the time of the show where we go into our patron-only mode. You gotta be a patron here. Come on. Come on. Oh, you're on the edge of your seat. You gotta be a patron. It's savage. Yeah,
so well done.